The sky above the meridian wastes was bleeding. It was not a metaphor. High in the upper atmosphere, the decomposing orbit of a derelict heavy cruiser had finally decayed past the point of no return. As the ancient warship hit the friction of the planetary shield, it broke apart, streaking across the heavy violet heavens like a claw mark of fire. Chunks of burning durasteel, some the size of houses, others the size of fists, rained down toward the horizon, leaving trails of black smoke to spoil the view of the three suns. The primary star, a bloated red giant that the locals called the Patriarch, hung low and heavy in the west. Flanking it were the twin white dwarfs, the Hounds, searing holes in the visual spectrum that made the heat shimmering off the dunes feel personal. Jace narrowed his eyes behind his polarized goggles, watching the orbital debris come down. Beautiful, he thought. Just beautiful. That is probably a few million credits worth of refined drive plate alloy burning up into vapor because physics is a cruel mistress. He turned his attention back to the dirt. He was standing knee-deep in red sand, wrestling with a rusted hydraulic actuator on the carcass of a downed Walker unit. The machine was old, likely from the 2nd century of the expansion wars, and it had been picked clean by generations of scavengers before Jace had even been born. But they had missed the actuator. It was fused to the knee joint, buried under a drift of silica that had turned to glass from some long-forgotten plasma blast. Jace grunted, leaning his entire weight against the pry bar. The metal groaned, a sound like a dying animal, and then snapped. Jace went flying backward, landing hard on his ass in the scorching sand. He held up the pry bar. It had sheared clean off at the tip. "Great," Jace said to the empty desert. "Just fantastic." "That tool cost me 40 credits. A static burst crackled in his ear, followed by the dry, synthetic voice of his ship's AI, which he had named Nav. "Your heart rate has elevated." "Jace," Nav said, "I assume the salvage operation is proceeding with its usual level of catastrophic failure." "Shut up, Nav," Jace muttered, climbing to his feet and dusting the red grit from his patched flight suit. He kicked the dead Walker unit. The metal rang hollow. "Add the pry bar to the loss column." "What is the haul looking like for the day?" "Calculating," Nav droned. "Assuming you can sell the copper wiring you pulled from that transport wreck without getting tetanus, and assuming the market price for depleted power cells does not crash in the next 3 hours. We are looking at a net profit of 120 credits. Jace sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead. 120. "That is correct," Nav replied. "And the interest payment due to the Obsidian Cartel by sunset is 500 credits. Jace stared at the horizon where the orbital debris was still falling, burning up perfectly good money. He had a stack of debts that could reach the moon, a one-man salvage skiff held together by duct tape and prayers, and a history of running away from every person who had ever tried to care about him. He was 34 years old, and his net worth was currently negative. He trudged back toward his skiff, a flat, ugly wedge of metal hovering on repulsor lifts a few meters away. It looked less like a spacecraft and more like a dumpster with engines strapped to it. "Scan again," Jace said as he climbed into the cockpit, the air conditioning hitting him with a blast of stale, recycled cold. "Widen the parameters." "Safety protocols advise against widening parameters beyond the green zone," Nav said. "The structural integrity of the skiff is compromised. Also, you are a biological entity with a low tolerance for radiation and death." "Do it," Jace snapped, flipping switches on the dashboard. The holographic display flickered, casting a blue glow over Jace's tired features. He had the face of a man who smiled often but never meant it. Sharp eyes, a jawline stubbled with days of neglect, and a scar running through his left eyebrow that twitched when he was stressed. It was twitching now. Nav expanded the sensor grid. The map on the console zoomed out, showing the safe salvage zones, and then pushed past them into the jagged black lines of the Forbidden Grid. The Forbidden Grid was a graveyard of legends. It was whispered about in cantinas from the core worlds to the Rim. They said it housed unmapped minefields left over from the God Kings, cursed weaponry that drove men mad, and Empire black sites where the government buried its mistakes. No sane salvager went there. Jace stared at the screen. A faint rhythmic pulse was blinking in the heart of a canyon network deep in the red zone. "What is that?" Jace asked. Jace. "Anomalous energy signature," Nav reported, sounding almost hesitant. "It does not match any known reactor profile. It is massive. And it is old." "How old?" "Pre-unification. Maybe older." Jace did the mental math. Pre-unification tech was worth a fortune to collectors. Even a scrap of hull plating from that era could pay off the cartel, fix the ship, and buy him a ticket to a planet with oceans and breathable air. "It is likely a trap," Nav said, "or a radiation leak that will melt your bones. Or it is a winning lottery ticket waiting to be picked up," Jace said, grabbing the flight stick. "Jace," Nav said, the voice taking on a warning tone. "That sector is flagged as a kill box. Imperial navigation charts have it marked with a skull. Not a metaphorical skull, no literal red skull." Jace gunned the engines. The skiff lurched forward, sand spraying in its wake. "I like skulls," Jace said, forcing a grin that felt tight on his face. "They have character." He flew low and fast, hugging the terrain to stay under the radar of the automated defense satellites that supposedly still orbited the sector. The landscape changed as they crossed the border into the Forbidden Grid. The sand turned from gold to a bruised purple, and the wind howled through jagged rock formations that looked like broken teeth. The energy signature grew stronger, a steady thrumming that vibrated the fillings in Jace's teeth. "Approaching coordinates," Nav said. "Warning, high levels of electrostatic discharge detected. Warning, biological distress signal detected." "Wait," Jace frowned, easing back on the throttle. "Biological? You said it was a reactor. I said it was anomalous." Nav corrected. "Look." Jace crested a massive razor-edged dune and slammed on the air brakes. The skiff drifted to a halt, kicking up a cloud of dust. As the dust settled, Jace looked out the viewport and his breath caught in his throat. It was impossible. In the center of a crater made of fused glass lay the wreckage of an ancient fortress ship. It was colossal, a city-sized slab of dark metal half sunken in the sand. But the ship was just the backdrop. Surrounding the wreck were 12 glowing pylons, each 100 feet tall, crackling with arcs of blue lightning. The pylons formed a circle, and in the center of that circle, shackled to the ground by chains of pure, humming energy, was a monster. It was a dragon. There was no other word for it. The creature was immense, its body coiled like a mountain range of obsidian and emerald. Its scales were the size of blast shields, iridescent and cracked from decades, maybe centuries, of exposure to the triple suns. Massive wings, tattered but still majestic, were pinned to the earth by spears of light. Its head, crowned with curved horns that looked like obsidian scythes, rested on the sand. Jace sat frozen in the cockpit. He had heard the stories. Everyone had. The dragon weapons. The propaganda vids from the old war claimed the enemy had bred monsters. Biological siege engines capable of glassing entire colonies. But the war had been over for 50 years. The dragons were supposed to be extinct, hunted down and slaughtered to the last beast. This one was alive, He could see the slow, ragged rise and fall of its ribcage, a movement that displaced tons of sand with every breath. "We are leaving," Nav said instantly, turning the ship around, engaging emergency thrusters. "Belay that!" Jace shouted, his hand hovering over the controls. "Jace, that is a Class 1 apex predator," Nav insisted. "It eats tanks. It breathes plasma. It is arguably the most dangerous thing in this quadrant." "It is chained up," Jace said, his voice quiet. "Look at it." He stared at the monitor. The zoom lens showed the creature's face, one massive eye, the color of molten gold, opened slowly. It was dull, filmed over with exhaustion and pain, but it focused directly on Jace's tiny skiff. It saw him. A shiver of primal fear went down Jace's spine, the genetic memory of a small mammal realizing it had been spotted by a hawk. But beneath the fear, something else clawed at his gut. Outrage. The creature was baking alive. The chains were humming with a frequency that Jace knew, even from here, was designed to stimulate pain receptors. It was torture, not containment. Torture. Left here in the middle of nowhere to rot under 3 suns. "I am going out there," Jace said. "You are insane," Nav replied. "There are likely Empire kill codes embedded in this site. If the authorities find you here, they will not arrest you. They will vaporize you from orbit. There are bounty notices for anyone tampering with war remnants." "I am not going to let it die like that," Jace said, grabbing his toolkit and his rebreather mask. "It is a weapon." "Jace," Nav argued. "It is not a puppy." Jace ignored the AI and popped the canopy. The heat hit him like a physical blow, smelling of ozone and ancient dust. He slid down the side of the skiff and began to walk toward the circle of pylons. The ground vibrated under his boots. As he got closer, the sheer scale of the dragon became overwhelming. He was an ant walking toward a sleeping god. The heat radiating off its black scales was intense enough to singe his eyebrows. He stopped 10 yards from the snout. The golden eye tracked him. It was intelligent. He could feel the weight of that gaze pressing against his mind. Then, a voice spoke in his head. It was not a sound. It was a sensation, like dry leaves scraping over stone, vibrating directly into his temporal lobe. "Are you going to stare until I die, little meat thing, or are you going to do something useful?" Jace jumped, nearly dropping his toolkit. He looked around wildly. "Did you hear that?" Jace whispered into his comms. "Hear what?" Nav asked in his ear. "I detect no audio transmission. Just high-level psionic background radiation. You should run." "I am not a radiation leak," the voice in his head rasped, sounding amused and incredibly weary. "I am talking to you, the small, soft one in the ugly suit." Jace looked back at the dragon. The great eye blinked. "You can talk?" Jace asked, feeling ridiculous. "I can project thought," the dragon replied. "It saves breath, and I have very little breath left. Why are you here? To scavenge my bones? You will have to wait a few more days." "I saw the energy spike," Jace said, stepping a little closer. I didn't know you were here." "Nobody knows you are here." "The council knows," the voice said, bitter and sharp as glass. "They put me here." "Who are you?" Jace asked. "I am Sarai," the dragon said. "Just Sarai? No rank? No serial number?" "Knowing more would complicate your conscience," Sarai replied. "And you look like a man with a very fragile conscience." Jace scoffed, his fear retreating slightly behind his usual defense mechanism of sarcasm. "Hey, my conscience is reinforced with Durasteel." "Thanks. And for the record, you are the one chained to a rock." "I am the one with the ship." "A ship?" Sarai's mental voice carried a tone of mockery. "Is that what that floating debris is?" I thought it was a remarkably large piece of trash caught in the wind. Okay. Ouch, Jace muttered. That is my livelihood you are insulting. And for an overgrown lizard, you have got a lot of attitude. Overgrown lizard, Sarai repeated. The ground rumbled as a low growl vibrated in her chest. If I were not bound, I would teach you the difference between a lizard and a god, little scavenger. Jace stepped up to one of the massive energy chains anchored to her foreleg. The link was thick as his torso, glowing with a pulsing violet light. He pulled out his scanner and ran it over the mechanism. This is messy, Jace murmured, looking at the readings. It is a fusion of tech, Imperial suppression fields. Yeah. But the base code? This is bioorganic. It is keyed to your DNA. Brilliant deduction, Sarai said dryly. It feeds on my own bioelectric output to power the containment. The more I struggle, the tighter it holds. It is an elegant loop of misery. Jace looked at the pylons. He could see the control nodes. They were old, corroded by the sandstorms. If he could create a feedback loop, introduce a conflicting signal into the control frequency, he might be able to crash the system. But if he did that, the energy discharge would be massive, and the Empire would know. Nav's voice buzzed in his ear. Jace, I am detecting a transponder signal buried in the pylons. If you break that chain, it will scream to every monitoring station in the sector. We will have company. Bad company. Jace hesitated. His hand hovered over the control node. He should leave. He should get back in his skiff, fly away, and forget he ever saw this. It was not his problem. He was a guy who salvaged scrap, not a guy who started wars. Suddenly, a memory hit him, unbidden and sharp. He was 7 years old. It was raining on the colony world of Agria. He was peering through the slats of the window blinds, watching Imperial soldiers drag their neighbor, Mr. Henderson, out into the street. Mr. Henderson had been a teacher. He had been kind. He was screaming for help. Jace had looked up at his father, standing in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter until his knuckles were white. Do something, Dad. 7-year-old Jace had whispered. His father had not moved. He had just stared at the floor, terrified, silent, while the man outside was beaten and thrown into a transport. Jace had hated his father in that moment, not for being weak, but for doing nothing, for watching. Jace looked up at the dragon woman. Her eye was watching him, judging him. She expected him to leave. She expected him to be like everyone else. Go on, Sarai said softly in his mind. Run away. It is what your kind does best. Jace gritted his teeth. I am not running, he said. What? I said I am not running, Jace shouted, his voice cracking. I am tired of running. He jammed his hydrospanner into the access port of the nearest pylon. He frantically began to rewire the coupling, bypassing the safety regulators. Jace, stop, Nav screamed. The energy feedback will fry you if I do not do this. I am just another coward in the dark, Jace yelled back. You will die, Sarai warned, her voice losing its mockery, replaced by sudden, intense alarm. The discharge will be lethal for a soft skin. Then I guess it is a good day to die, Jace retorted. He crossed the final wires. The pylon screamed. A high-pitched whine tore through the air, shattering the silence of the desert. The violet light in the chains flared white-hot. Sparks showered down on Jace like rain. He screamed as the feedback current arced through his tool and up his arm, throwing him backward. The ground heaved, with a sound like a thunderclap. The pylons overloaded. The energy chains shattered, exploding into fragments of light and metal. Sarai howled. It was a sound that defied description. It was triumph and agony and rage all mixed together. It shook the dunes, sending avalanches of sand cascading down into the crater. The force of her cry blew out the windows of Jace's skiff 100 yards away. Jace lay on his back, gasping for air, his arm numb, smoke rising from his flight suit. He looked up through the haze of dust. The dragon was rising. She stretched her wings, blocking out the suns, casting a shadow that covered the world. Fire leaked from her jaws. Jace squeezed his eyes shut. She is going to kill me, he thought. I just let a monster out of a box and she is going to eat me as a snack. But the fire did not come. Instead, he heard a sickening sound of cracking bones and shifting wet meat. The massive shadow shrank. The ground stopped shaking. The heat intensity dropped. Jace opened one eye. The giant dragon was gone, standing in the center of the broken chains amidst the swirling dust. Was a woman. She was tall, easily 7 feet, towering over where Jace lay. Her skin was a deep, dusky gray, but patches of it were covered in iridescent emerald scales that looked like armor plating, along her shoulders, down her spine, and covering her forearms and shins. Her hands ended in sharp, black claws. Her hair was a mane of thick black braids that seemed to float slightly in the static charged air. Her eyes were the same glowing gold as the dragon's. She was also completely naked. She stood there, breathing heavy, ragged breaths, shaking dust from her limbs. She looked down at her own hands, flexing the claws, then looked up at Jace. Jace scrambled backward, his face flushing crimson. He immediately averted his eyes and staring intently at a random rock on the ground. Oh, wow. Okay, Jace stammered. You changed. You are smaller. Sarai took a step toward him. Her movement was fluid, predatory, yet strangely graceful. She ignored her nudity completely, standing with the arrogance of a queen in her own court. I am a shifter, you idiot, she said, though this time she spoke with her throat. Her voice was deep, husky, and raspy from disuse. Dragons are too big for detailed conversation. She looked down at him, a smirk touching her lips. Why are you looking at the ground? She asked. You are naked, Jace choked out. Sarai laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. Humans, she said. You liberate a prisoner from 30 years of torture, yet you are terrified of a little skin? You are a strange species. She reached down and offered him a hand. Her clawed fingers looked dangerous, sharp enough to slice his throat, but her grip was firm. Jace hesitated, then took her hand. Her skin was hot to the touch, like fever heat, dry and smooth. She pulled him to his feet effortlessly, as if he weighed nothing. There was a moment where they stood close, too close. Jace looked up into her gold eyes, trying desperately to keep his gaze above her neck. He felt a sudden, bizarre pull, a magnetic snap of attraction that had no business existing in a situation this terrifying. She was an alien. She was a monster, she was dangerous, and she was the most stunning thing he had ever seen. Sarai tilted her head, sniffing the air near him. You smell like fear, she noted, and ozone, and bad coffee. Yeah, well, Jace managed to say, stepping back to put a respectful distance between them. That is the signature scent of Jace Vero. Warning, Nav's voice cut in, loud enough that Sarai could hear it from Jace's earpiece. Deep space sensors just lit up like a festival tree. That beacon you tripped, it just broadcast a sector-wide priority alpha signal. Jace looked at the wreckage of the pylons. A red light was pulsing atop the central spire. How many ships? Jace asked. 6, Nav said. Correction, 8, impulse drives flaring. They will be in atmospheric range in 4 minutes. Bounty hunters, maybe Imperial Vanguard. They are converging on these coordinates. Jace looked at Sarai. She was looking at the sky, her expression hardening. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by a cold, terrifying resolve. They are coming, she said quietly. Jace looked at his ruined pry bar, then at the woman standing in the wreckage of her prison. He thought about his debt. He thought about the safe, boring obscurity of his life before 10 minutes ago. He took a breath. I freed a chained giant dragon woman in the desert, and what happened next proved I was wrong. Jace looked at Sarai. We have to go, he said. My skiff is small. It smells like grease, and the passenger seat is broken, but it is faster than walking. Sarai looked at him, surprised. You are staying? She asked. You could run, take your skiff and flee in the other direction. They want me, not you. If you leave now, you might live. Jace looked at the falling stars in the sky, which were now clearly resolving themselves into the shapes of attack corvettes. I told you, Jace said, turning toward his ship. I am done running. Sarai stared at him for a heartbeat longer, searching for the lie. When she did not find it, she nodded once. Then drive fast. Scavenger, she said, sprinting toward the skiff with terrifying speed. Or we are both dead. Jace ran after her as the first sonic booms of the entering ships hammered the desert floor. Get in, Jace screamed, his voice cracking over the roar of the engines. The salvage skiff was hovering 3 feet off the ground, vibrating violently as the repulsor lifts fought against the sudden intake of sand and the sheer weight of the impending disaster. Sarai did not scramble. Despite the fact that 8 Imperial pursuit corvettes were currently turning the sky into a crisscross of vapor trails and targeting locks. She moved with the terrifying, deliberate slowness of a predator deciding whether or not to strike. She looked at the cramped cockpit, then at Jace, her golden eyes narrowing in disdain. This is a bucket, she stated, her voice booming over the wind. It is a calibrated extraction vehicle. Jace yelled back, slamming his hand on the canopy release. And right now, it is your only ride out of a firing squad. Get in the damn seat. Sarai grabbed the roll bar with a hand that could have crushed a tank barrel and hauled herself up. The entire skiff listed dangerously to the right. She swung her long legs into the passenger well, her knees jamming against the dashboard. She was too big for the space, too tall, too broad at the shoulders, her presence overwhelming the small, grease-stained cabin. Nav! Get us out of here! Jace shouted, buckling his harness. I am routing power to the rear thrusters, Nav replied, the AI's voice tight with synthesized panic. Warning, multiple target locks detected. We are being painted by fire control radar. Survival probability is currently hovering around 4%. Never tell me the odds. Nav, Jace snapped, jamming the throttle forward. The skiff surged. The G-force slammed Jace back into his seat, knocking the wind out of him. They shot forward, skimming mere inches above the dune crests, kicking up a rooster tail of red sand that hung in the air like blood mist. Behind them, the desert exploded. A plasma bolt the size of a bus slammed into the crater where Sarai had been chained moments before. The shockwave hit the skiff like a physical hammer, sending them spiraling sideways. Jace fought the stick, his teeth gritted, wrestling the controls as the horizon spun wildly. Sky, sand, sky, sand. Stabilize, Jace roared. I am trying, Nav yelled back. Sarai squeezed into the passenger seat, let out a hiss of annoyance. She reached out and grabbed the dashboard, her claws digging deep grooves into the plastic. You fly like a drunken insect, she growled. I am dodging orbital bombardment, Jace shouted, correcting the spin and diving the skiff into a winding canyon network. If you have a better idea, feel free to share. I do, Sarai said. She unbuckled her harness. What are you doing? Jace cried, glancing over as the canyon walls blurred past them at 300 miles per hour. Sit down! Sarai ignored him. She twisted in the seat, turning her back toward the rear of the cockpit. She closed her eyes, and the air in the cabin suddenly grew heavy, charged with static electricity. The smell of ozone overpowered the smell of burning fuel. Through the rear canopy, Jace saw 3 sleek black attack drones drop out of the sky. Their wings angled for attack. They were fast, agile, and armed with rapid-fire plasma cannons. They are closing, Nav warned. Range 500 meters, 400. Sarai let out a low, guttural sound that vibrated through the floorboards. Her skin split. Jace gagged, watching in horror and fascination, along her spine and shoulder blades. The emerald scales shifted and cracked open. There was no blood, only a flash of blinding green light. From her back, 2 massive structures erupted, not full wings but armored, skeletal partial wings comprised of bone and hard light energy. They smashed through the rear canopy glass, shattering it outward. My window, Jace yelled. That is structural glass, drive, Sarai commanded, her voice strained with effort. The drones opened fire. Streams of superheated green plasma tore through the air. Sarai expanded the partial wings, angling them like shields behind the skiff. The plasma bolts slammed into her scaled appendages. Instead of burning through, the energy splashed against her scales like water hitting a hot skillet, deflecting harmlessly into the canyon walls. The impact shook the skiff violently. Sarai grunted, her teeth bared, sweat beading on her gray skin. She was still weak, drained from decades of starvation and containment, but she was holding the line. Jace realized with a jolt of adrenaline that she was literally acting as a living heat shield for his engines. Okay, Jace muttered, refocusing on the treacherous path ahead. Okay. That is actually impressive. He threw the skiff into a hard bank, scraping the paint off the right fender against a sandstone arch. The canyon was a maze of wind-carved rock, full of sudden turns and falling debris. It was a suicide run for any pilot who did not know the terrain. Fortunately, Jace had spent 10 years mapping these washouts looking for scrap. Hard left, Nav screamed. Jace yanked the stick. The skiff drifted sideways, narrowly missing a spire of rock. One of the pursuing drones tried to follow the maneuver. It clipped the spire, spun out of control, and slammed into the canyon wall in a blossoming flower of orange fire. One down, Jace cheered, a manic grin spreading across his face. 2 to go. Sarai shifted her wings, deflecting another volley of fire that would have vaporized their fuel cell. Do not celebrate yet, little man, she strained, her eyes glowing fiercely. I cannot hold this forever. My energy reserves are empty. We are almost there, Jace promised. Just hang on. He pushed the engines into the red. The temperature gauge spiked. The entire frame of the ship groaned in protest. Ahead, the canyon ended in a sheer wall of rock. Jace, Nav shouted. Wall, I see it, Jace said. He did not slow down. He accelerated. Are you trying to kill us to save them the trouble? Sarai asked, though she did not flinch. Trust me, Jace yelled. At the last second, Jace punched a sequence into the nav computer. A hidden hologram emitter on the cliff face flickered and died, revealing a dark, gaping mouth of a tunnel masked by the rock illusion. The skiff shot into the darkness. Jace slammed on the air brakes and cut the engines. The skiff skidded across the stone floor, sparks flying as the landing skids ground against the rock. They drifted sideways, spinning 360 degrees before coming to a screeching, smoking halt against a pile of old shipping crates. Silence descended, heavy and ringing. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sounds were the ticking of the cooling engines and the heavy, ragged breathing of two terrified people. Jace slumped in his seat, his hands shaking on the controls. "We are alive," he whispered. "Nav, hull integrity is at 30%. Nav reported, sounding disgusted. "The rear canopy is gone, the repulsor coils are fused, and we are leaking coolant. This vessel will not fly again without a major overhaul." "Great," Jace sighed. He looked over at Sarai. She was slumped forward, her forehead resting on the dashboard. The massive glowing wings on her back flickered and dissolved into mist, retracting back into her body with a wet, shifting sound. The scales on her back smoothed over, leaving only faint scars. She looked exhausted. Her gray skin was pale, and the emerald scales on her arms looked dull. "Hey," Jace said softly. "You okay?" Sarai lifted her head. She looked at him, her golden eyes dim. "You have a hero complex. Scavenger," she rasped. "It is a very inefficient survival trait." "And you are a space worm with an attitude problem," Jace shot back, unbuckling his harness. "But you make a pretty good blast shield." He climbed out of the cockpit and offered her a hand. She stared at it for a second, then slapped it away, pulling herself up with a groan of effort. She stumbled as she hit the ground, her legs shaking. Jace instinctively reached out to steady her, his hands gripping her bare arms. Her skin was burning hot, like touching a feverish child. She flinched at his touch but did not pull away. "Easy," Jace said. "I have got you." "I do not need your pity," Sarai hissed, though she leaned her weight against him. "It is not pity," Jace said, guiding her through the gloom of the tunnel. "It is simple physics. You are heavy. Gravity is working, and I would rather you not faceplant in the dirt." They walked in silence for a while, the only light coming from the emergency glow strips on Jace's flight suit. The tunnel was part of an old smuggling network, a labyrinth of abandoned mines that ran deep beneath the planet's crust. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and rust. Jace glanced at her profile in the dim light. She was towering, dangerous, and utterly alien. Yet seeing her limp, seeing the way she held her head high despite the obvious pain, he felt a strange ache in his chest. "What are you?" he asked finally. "And do not give me the dragon line again." "I saw those wings. That was not biology. That was tech." Sarai was silent for a long time. The sound of their boots echoing on the stone filled the space. "My people are called the Draki," she said, her voice echoing softly. "We are old, before your empire, before the republics. We were born of the void between stars. But what I am now, that is not natural." She gestured to the faint, glowing lines of circuitry visible beneath the scales on her forearm. "We were altered," she explained, "centuries ago. The architects, the ones who built the machines you scavenge, they took us. They wove high-energy physics into our biology. They wanted guardians, living strategic deterrents." "Deterrents?" Jace repeated. "Like nukes, like gods bound to a leash," Sarai corrected bitterly. "We bond to a planet. We draw power from its core. We defend it, or if our masters command, we destroy it. I am a siege breaker class. I was designed to crack orbital blockades and burn cities." Jace stopped walking. He stared at her. "Is that what happened?" he asked quietly. "The city, the one they say you burned?" Sarai stopped too. She did not look at him. She stared into the darkness ahead. "It was during the last war," she said. "The Council was losing the sector. The enemy fleet was in orbit. I was bonded to the capital city, Orizon. My directive was to defend." She paused, her jaw tightening. "But the command codes were overridden. Confused, I felt a spike of aggression that was not mine. A hunger that was not mine. I shifted. I meant to target the fleet. But when I opened my mouth, she closed her eyes. The fire went down, not up. Jace felt a chill that had nothing to do with the tunnel's temperature. An entire city, he whispered. Millions of people. That is the official number, Sarai said, her voice cold and detached. Officially, I went rogue. A biological malfunction. The council heroically subdued me and chained me in the desert as a warning to other systems. And unofficially? Jace asked. Sarai turned to him. Her eyes were hard, flashing with a mix of rage and ancient sorrow. Unofficially? The enemy fleet never fired a shot. They retreated the moment the city burned. The council signed a peace treaty 3 days later, using the threat of my madness to force every other system in the sector to surrender to their protection. I was the scapegoat and the weapon that ended the war. Jace stared at her, his mind reeling. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that the woman who had shielded his ship was a victim. But he looked at her claws. He looked at the latent power shimmering under her skin. She was a weapon. She had admitted to the killing. Did you do it? Jace asked, his voice shaking slightly. Even if you were tricked, did you burn them? Sarai stepped closer to him. She loomed over him, forcing him to look up into her alien, beautiful, terrifying face. Does it matter? She asked softly. The ash is the same. It matters to me, Jace said. Sarai laughed, a harsh, short sound. You want a hero. Jace, you want to believe you saved a princess. But you saved a monster. I do not need your belief. I only need your choices. Are you going to help me, or are you going to leave me here in the dark? Jace looked at her. He thought about Mr. Henderson being dragged away in the rain. He thought about the council ships raining fire on the desert. He turned and started walking again. Come on, he said gruffly. There is an outpost about 2 clicks north. We need to get you some clothes. You are freaking me out. Sarai watched him go, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before she followed. The outpost was known as the Sump. It was a cavernous hollow carved out of a salt mine, lit by flickering neon signs and halogen floodlights. It smelled of unwashed bodies, synthetic alcohol, and cooking grease. It was populated by the dregs of the galaxy, smugglers, spice runners, wanted criminals, and scavengers who had washed out of legitimate space. Jace led Sarai through the crowded market stalls, keeping to the shadows. It was impossible to hide her completely. She was a head taller than everyone else, and her gray skin stood out against the grime. Heads turned, eyes lingered. Jace felt the weight of the stares. They were hungry looks, predatory. Keep your head down, Jace hissed. I am not ashamed, Sarai replied, walking with her spine straight. Let them look. Yeah. Well, if they look too hard, they might recognize the giant wanted poster that is currently being beamed to every bounty puck in the sector, Jace muttered. A weak-way trader with a mechanical eye leered at Sarai as they passed, dropping a comment in hootas about her hips. Sarai stopped. She turned slowly to face him. Her upper lip curled back, revealing serrated teeth. A low growl started in her chest. The trader paled and backed away, knocking over a crate of melons. Jace grabbed Sarai's arm and yanked her forward. Stop threatening the locals, he whispered. He was rude, Sarai said. He is a pirate, Jace said. Rudeness is his job description. Just act normal. Normal? Sarai scoffed. Jace pulled her toward a stall selling used enviro gear. The proprietor, a bored Rhodian, looked up from his datapad. He stared at Sarai's naked, scaled form. His eyes bugged out. What in the moons is that? The Rhodian asked. Jace stepped in front of Sarai, forcing a bright, fake smile. Cosplay, Jace said loudly. She is a cosplayer, very dedicated. It is a dragon queen from the Nebula Chronicles. You know the show? The Rhodian blinked. The body mod work is extensive. She is very method, Jace said. We need a cloak, something big, and desert wraps. The Rhodian tossed a bundle of dark brown fabric onto the counter. 50 credits. Jace slapped the credits down before the man could ask questions. He grabbed the bundle and dragged Sarai into a shadowy alcove behind a generator stack. Cosplay? Sarai asked, raising an eyebrow. Just put it on, Jace said, handing her the cloak. Sarai unfolded the heavy fabric. She struggled with the fastenings, her long claws fumbling with the small buckles and ties. She growled in frustration. Here, Jace said, stepping closer. Let me. He reached out and took the ends of the cloak. He pulled it around her shoulders, fastening the clasp at her throat. He had to stand on his toes to reach properly. For a moment, they were inches apart again. Jace's hands brushed against the skin of her neck. It was incredibly soft, despite the scales nearby. The heat radiating from her was intoxicating. He looked up and found her watching him. Her gaze was not predatory now. It was curious, open, unsettlingly intense. Why are you shaking? Sarai asked softly. I am not shaking. Jace lied. His hands were trembling slightly as he adjusted the folds of the fabric over her chest. You are afraid of me, Sarai stated. I can smell the cortisol in your sweat. And yet, your hands are gentle. Jace froze. He looked into her golden eyes. Fear and attraction are not mutually exclusive. Sarai, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. It is a very confusing human trait. Sarai tilted her head. I have not been touched without pain in 30 years, she murmured. She leaned in slightly. Jace's breath hitched. The air between them crackled with a tension that was sudden and sharp. It was the dangerous allure of standing next to a reactor core, the knowledge that it could kill you, and the desire to touch the light anyway. Jace cleared his throat and stepped back, breaking the moment. Right, he said, his voice sounding thin. That should cover the dragonness. Let's find a data terminal. We need to know what is happening topside. Sarai watched him retreat, a faint, thoughtful smile touching her lips. They found a cantina on the edge of the market. A large holographic screen dominated the back wall, broadcasting the galactic news feed. Jace and Sarai stood in the back, huddled under the shadows of a ventilation duct. The screen flickered, and the seal of the Central Council appeared. A grim-faced spokesperson, a human woman with severe hair, began to speak. Strategic Asset Alpha Sarai has breached containment, the woman announced. This entity is classified as a Category 5 biological weapon. She is responsible for the destruction of Orizon. Citizens are advised that she is unstable, extremely violent, and capable of psychic manipulation. A grainy image appeared on the screen. It was taken from the security footage of the pylon site. It showed Jace, looking small and frantic, working on the controls. The fugitive known as Jace Varro is aiding the creature. The spokesperson continued. He is to be considered armed and complicit in treason. Any assistance provided to either target is punishable by summary execution. The bar went quiet. People muttered to each other. That is me, Jace whispered, staring at his face on the screen. I am on the news. I am treasonous. Mom would be so proud. Sarai was staring at the footage of herself, a loop of the old war, showing a dragon silhouette wreathed in fire. Look, she hissed. What? The footage, Sarai said. pointing a clawed finger from beneath her cloak. Look at the timestamp. Look at the shadows. That footage is spliced. They are cutting out the retreat of the enemy fleet. They are making it look like I attacked a peaceful city. It is propaganda, Sarai, Jace whispered. That is what they do. It is a lie, Sarai snarled, loud enough that a few patrons turned to look. Jace grabbed her arm. Keep it down. Hey, Jace. Jace froze. He knew that voice. He turned slowly. Standing near the entrance to the alcove was a short, greasy man with a cybernetic jaw. It was Vix, an information broker Jace had sold scrap to in the past. Vix was smiling, but his eyes were darting between Jace and the cloaked figure beside him. Vix, Jace said, forcing a casual tone. Long time. I see you are moving up in the world, Vix said, his mechanical jaw clicking. From scrap metal to high-value assets. I do not know what you mean, Jace said. Cut the poodoo. Jace, Vix whispered, stepping closer. I saw the alert. That is her, isn't it? The dragon. Sarai tensed under her cloak. Jace squeezed her arm, signaling her to wait. What do you want, Vix? Jace asked. I want to help you, Vix said smoothly. You are in over your head, kid. The Council, the Vanguard, they will vaporize this whole rock to get her. But Vix pulled a small data chip from his pocket. I have a contact, Vix murmured, a private collector, very wealthy. He pays for exotic artifacts. He can get you off-world, new identity, debt wiped clean, enough credits to buy your own moon. Jace stared at the chip. All you have to do, Vix whispered, is ping her location at these coordinates. A retrieval team will handle the rest. You walk away rich. She goes back to a cage, sure. But she is a monster, right? Better in a cage than burning down the galaxy. Jace looked at the chip. It was freedom. It was everything he had ever wanted. No more debt, no more running, no more looking over his shoulder. He looked at Sarai. She was watching him. She had heard every word. Her face was impassive, unreadable. She was waiting for him to choose. She did not beg. She did not threaten. She just watched. Jace looked back at Vix. 5 million credits? Jace asked. 10. Vix smiled. Jace took the chip. He held it in his hand, feeling the weight of it. 10 million credits to sell a soul, Jace said softly. He looked at Sarai. He saw the cracks in her scales. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes. He saw the woman who had shielded his ship with her own body. He thought about the neighbor being dragged away. He thought about his father doing nothing. Jace closed his hand over the chip. Deal? Vix asked, extending his hand. Jace dropped the chip onto the floor and crushed it under his boot. No deal, Jace said. Vix's smile vanished. You are making a mistake, Jace, a fatal one. Get lost, Vix, Jace said, his voice low and dangerous, before she gets hungry. Sarai let out a low, menacing hiss from beneath her hood. Vix took a step back, pale, then turned and vanished into the crowd. Jace let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for an hour. He turned to Sarai. She was staring at him with a look he couldn't quite place. It was shock, mixed with something softer. You could have been rich, she said quietly. Yeah. Well, Jace shrugged, trying to hide the fact that his hands were shaking again. I am bad with money. I would have just wasted it on something stupid, like a newer ship or a personality transplant. Sarai studied him. You are a fool, Jace Vero. Probably, Jace agreed. He pulled up his wrist comp and tapped a few keys, deleting Vix's contact info permanently. If the Council wants you, Jace said, looking her in the eye, they are going to have to go through me too. He paused, then added with a wry grin. Though, honestly, they will probably go through me like tissue paper. So, do not rely on me as a physical shield. Sarai looked at him for a long moment. Then, she threw her head back and laughed. It was not the dark, dry chuckle from the desert. It was a genuine, full-throated sound. It was deep and musical, a sound that seemed to vibrate in her chest and fill the small alcove with warmth. It transformed her face, softening the sharp angles, making the glowing eyes shine with mirth instead of rage. It was the most beautiful sound Jace had ever heard. Tissue paper, she wheezed, wiping a tear from her eye. You are ridiculous. Come on, tissue paper, she said, grabbing his shoulder with a grip that was firm but not crushing. Let's go start a revolution, or at least find something to eat. I am starving, Jace smiled, a real smile this time. After you, Your Highness. They walked out of the shadows together, moving deeper into the neon haze of the underworld, two fugitives against the galaxy. The trade caravan was a rolling disaster of rusted metal, repulsor lift wagons, and six-legged pack beasts that smelled like sulfur and unwashed socks. It moved across the salt flats like a disjointed centipede, kicking up a cloud of white dust that coated everything in a fine, chalky layer. Jay sat on the back of a hovering flatbed, his legs dangling over the edge, watching the endless horizon of the wastes roll by. Beside him sat Sarai. She was wrapped in the heavy brown desert cloak they had bought at the outpost, her face obscured by a thick veil. She looked less like a traveler and more like a menacing, hooded statue that had decided to take a vacation. So, the wagon master asked, spitting a wad of chewing tobacco onto the passing sand. You two are pilgrims? Jace looked at the wagon master, a squat man with skin like leather and 3 mechanical fingers. That is right, Jace lied smoothly. Heading to Namara for the Festival of the Suns. The wagon master eyed Sarai. She was sitting perfectly still, her posture rigid, her cloaked head brushing the canvas roof of the wagon. She was nearly 2 feet taller than the average human, even while sitting. She is big, the wagon master noted. Jace nodded solemnly. It is a glandular condition. Runs in the family. Her mother was a heavy lifter on a gravity world. The wagon master grunted. She does not talk much. She took a vow of silence, Jace said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Until we reach the holy city, she is very devout and very shy, under the heavy layers of wool and linen. Sarai let out a sound that might have been a snort, but Jace quickly coughed to cover it up. She looks strong, the wagon master said, eyeing Sarai's shrouded shoulders. Could use a back like that for loading crates. Jace patted Sarai's knee. It felt like patting a granite boulder wrapped in a blanket. Oh, she is delicate, Jace said. Very fragile. Faints at the sight of heavy lifting. Sarai's hand moved under the cloak. A sharp, clawed finger pinched Jace's thigh hard enough to bruise. Jace winced, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. Love you too, honey. Jace wheezed. The wagon master lost interest and wandered off to yell at a beast driver. As soon as he was gone, Sarai turned her veiled head toward Jace. Fragile? She hissed, her voice low and dangerous. I was improvising, Jace whispered, rubbing his leg. And hey, it worked. We are halfway to Namara and nobody has called the Imperial Vanguard. You make a very convincing silent giant wife. I should throw you off this wagon, Sarai muttered. But you won't, because I have the snacks. Jace pulled a skewer of grilled meat from his pack. He had bought it from a vendor at the last watering station. It was coated in a bright orange spice that smelled like chemical warfare. You want some? Jace asked. It is scorpion lizard, supposed to be spicy. Sarai hesitated. She reached out a hand, still wrapped in cloth, and took the skewer. She lifted the veil just enough to expose her mouth and slid the meat off the stick with a snap of her teeth. Jace watched her, waiting for the reaction. That level of spice usually made humans weep. Sarai chewed thoughtfully. She swallowed. It tingles, she said. Tingles? Jace asked. That sauce is rated as an industrial solvent in 3 systems. It has a pleasant warmth, Sarai noted, sounding genuinely delighted, like swallowing a very small, very polite coal. Do you have more? Jace handed her the rest of the bag. Watching her eat was strangely mesmerizing. For a creature who had spent decades chained to a rock, surviving on ambient energy and misery, the simple act of tasting food seemed to be a revelation. She ate with a focused intensity, savoring the textures, humming softly in her throat. It wasn't just the food. Over the last 2 days of travel, Jace had watched her react to the world. He saw her lift her face to the wind, letting the dry air rush over her skin without the bite of shackles. He saw her staring at the 3 suns, not with hatred, but with a sort of greedy wonder, as if she were drinking the light. She was terrifying. Yes, she was a weapon of mass destruction who could turn into a dragon. But in these moments, she was just someone who had been locked in a dark room for a lifetime, seeing the sky for the first time. It made Jace's chest ache in a way he didn't like. He preferred his life uncomplicated. This was getting complicated. That night, the caravan circled the wagons to make camp. The temperature dropped 50 degrees as the sun set, plunging the desert into a freezing, starlit darkness. Jace and Sarai sat a little apart from the others, near a small fire of dried cactus wood. The other travelers were singing a low, rhythmic song, clapping their hands to the beat. Sarai was listening, her head tilted. She had lowered her hood, the darkness hiding her features from the rest of the camp. The firelight danced on her scales, turning them into flickering jewels of green and gold. It is loud, Sarai said softly. The singing? Jace asked. I can ask them to shut up. No, Sarai said. It is life. It is messy and loud. She poked the fire with a metal rod, watching the sparks fly up. In the silence, Sarai said, her voice distant, there was nothing. No wind, no voices, just the hum of the pylons and the minds of the guards. You could hear them? Jace asked. I could feel them, she corrected. Their fear, their boredom, sometimes their cruelty. They hated me. Jace, they didn't know me, but they hated me. They projected images into my mind, fire, screaming children. They wanted me to feel guilty. They wanted me to break. She looked at Jace, her golden eyes reflecting the flames. I spent 30 years dreaming of burning the world, she whispered, just to make the noise stop. Jace looked down at his hands when he wanted to say something smart. He wanted to crack a joke about bad roommates. But the raw, gaping wound of her trauma was too big for sarcasm. I am sorry, Jace said. It was clumsy and inadequate, but it was true. Sarai looked at him. She reached out, her hand moving slowly, giving him time to pull away. She traced the line of his jaw with the back of a claw. Her skin was hot, dry, and terrifyingly strong. One slip, and she could open his throat. Jace didn't flinch. He held his breath, but he didn't pull back. Why did you come back for me? She asked, her voice barely a breath. In the canyon. You could have ejected. I told you, Jace said, his voice rough. I am done running. Sarai studied his face, her gaze intense, searching for something he wasn't sure he had. You are a strange little mammal, she murmured. You are terrified of everything. yet you walk into the fire. Jace let out a shaky laugh. He reached up and gently took her hand, moving it away from his neck before his pulse exploded. Yeah, well, he said, forcing a grin. I have been told I have poor survival instincts. Plus, you still owe me for the pry bar. Sarai smirked, the tension breaking. I will buy you a golden pry bar when we conquer the galaxy, she said. Let's just start with getting to Namara without getting shot, Jace said. 2 days later, they saw the city. Namara was an assault on the senses. It rose out of the desert like a mirage made of glass and greed. Massive mirrored towers pierced the sky, reflecting the brutal sunlight. Between the sleek skyscrapers lay a sprawl of ancient stone buildings, domes, and minarets, all fused together with neon cabling and holographic advertisements. Ships buzzed around the spires like angry hornets. It was beautiful. It was ugly. It was perfect cover. The caravan dropped them at the outer gates. Jace led Sarai, who was back under her heavy veil, through the crush of the pedestrian zones. The noise was deafening. Hawkers shouting in a dozen languages, the whine of repulsor engines, the thumping bass of music from open-air cantinas. Keep close, Jace muttered, grabbing her sleeve. And do not make eye contact with the drones. We are here for the data, Sarai reminded him, her voice tight. Where is this vault? The Undercity, Jace said. I have a contact, or rather, I know a guy who knows a back door. They descended into the bowels of the city. The deeper they went, the less sunlight reached the streets. The mirrors gave way to damp concrete and flickering fluorescent lights. This was the district where the illegal cyber docks and data fences operated. Jace stopped in front of a heavy steel door marked with a warning sign in basic, sewage maintenance. Do not enter. Very glamorous, Sarai noted. It is a classic, Jace said. He pulled out a slicing tool and jammed it into the keypad. The door hissed open. Inside was not a sewer, but a sleek, climate-controlled server farm. Rows of black obelisks hummed with blue light. The air was frigid. At the far end of the room sat a single terminal, guarded by 2 massive droids with heavy blasters. And behind the droids, a human guard in a crisp private security uniform looked up, startled. Hey, the guard shouted, reaching for his alarm panel. Who are you? Jace froze. He hadn't expected a live guard. We are inspectors? Jace tried. The guard frowned. Inspectors? At this hour? Let me see your clearance. Jace's hand drifted toward the stun grenade in his belt. This was going to go loud. He hated it when things went loud. Sarai stepped forward. She lowered her hood. She didn't shift. She didn't breathe fire. She simply looked at the guard. Her golden eyes flared with a sudden, intense luminosity. The air in the room seemed to ripple, a wave of psychic pressure expanding outward from her body. You do not need to see our clearance, Sarai said. Her voice was not loud, but it echoed with a strange, layered resonance, as if 3 people were speaking at once. The guard blinked. His eyes glazed over. I do not need to see your clearance, the guard repeated, his voice monotone. You are going to take a break, Sarai suggested. A long one. Outside. I am going to take a break. The guard agreed. He signaled the droids to stand down. Come on, boys, let's get some air. The guard and the 2 droids walked past Jace and Sarai, exiting the room without a backward glance. Jace stared at the closing door. Then at Sarai. Okay, Jace whispered. Since when can you do the Jedi mind trick? I am a psychic weapon. Jace, Sarai said, leaning against a server rack, looking suddenly tired. It only works on weak minds, and it gives me a headache. Now, get the data. Jace scrambled to the terminal. He plugged in his decoding deck. His fingers flew across the holographic keys. "I am accessing the Council archives," Jace muttered, "searching for Project Horizon. Asset Sarai. Here we go." Files began to scroll across the screen. Videos, audio logs, strategic maps. Jace's eyes widened as he read. "Oh," Jace breathed. "Oh no." "What is it?" Sarai asked, stepping up behind him. "It wasn't an accident," Jace said, his voice hollow. "Sarai, look." He pulled up a document stamped with the seal of the High Command and the glyph of the Alien Dominion, the enemy faction from the war. It was a treaty, dated 3 weeks before the destruction of Horizon. They made a deal. Jace read, "The Council and the Dominion." The war was bankrupting both sides. They needed a reason to stop fighting without losing face. And the Council needed a reason to implement the Emergency Powers Act, the law that gave them total control over the sector's resources. They needed a catastrophe, Sarai whispered, reading over his shoulder. Jace nodded. "They sabotaged your containment field. They deliberately lowered the psionic dampeners on the day the fleet arrived. They wanted you to lose control. They sacrificed the city to justify the peace treaty and the power grab." Sarai made a sound. It was low, guttural, and terrifying. "I didn't." "Just break?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," Jace said, turning to face her. "They broke you. They used you as the murder weapon, Sarai. And then they blamed the gun. The temperature in the room began to rise." Jace looked at the server racks. The blue lights were turning red. Sarai stepped back. Her hands were clenched into fists. Smoke was beginning to curl off her skin. The emerald scales on her arms were glowing with a bright, painful light. "They used me," she hissed. Her voice was changing, deepening into the dragon's roar. "They made me kill them. Mothers, children. They made me a monster so they could be kings." "Sarai, calm down," Jace said, holding up his hands. "Calm down," Sarai shouted. A wave of heat blasted from her body, scorching the paint off the nearest wall. "I should burn them all. I should turn this entire city into glass. I am exactly what they said I am." "No, you are not," Jace yelled, stepping forward. "Don't touch me," Sarai screamed, backing away. "I will burn you. I can't control it. The rage. Jace, it is eating me." She was vibrating, the air shimmering around her like a mirage. The floor tiles under her boots were cracking from the thermal stress. She looked at her hands with horror. "I am a monster." She sobbed, the anger collapsing into despair. "I am just a bomb waiting to go off. You should have left me in the desert." Jace looked at her. He felt the heat searing his face. His flight suit was starting to smell like hot plastic. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run. He took a step forward. "Jace, stop," Sarai cried. "I will kill you. I don't care," Jace shouted. He stepped right into the shimmering heat haze. It felt like walking into an oven. His skin screamed. He reached out and grabbed her shoulders. Her skin was scalding, but he didn't let go. "Look at me," Jace commanded. Sarai froze, her golden eyes wide with shock. "You are not a bomb," Jace said, his voice fierce, his face inches from hers. "You are Sarai. You were hurt. You were used. But you are here, right now, and you are making a choice." "I killed them," she whispered. "They made you pull the trigger," Jace said. "But you are holding the gun now. Do not let them decide who you are." "I don't know who I am," she admitted, tears evaporating on her hot cheeks. "That is okay," Jace whispered. He leaned his forehead against hers. The contact burned, a sharp, electric pain that went straight to his soul. I don't want perfection. Sarai, I don't want a hero. I just want you. Sarai let out a shuddering breath. The intense, blinding light in her scales began to dim. The crushing heat receded, leaving only a warm, vibrating hum. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face, seeing the sweat, the red marks where her heat had singed him, and the absolute stubborn refusal to leave. "You are an idiot," she whispered. "Yeah," Jace breathed. "I know." He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle movie star kiss. It was an impact. It was hot, tasting of ozone and spice and fear. Her lips were searing, her skin rough with scales, her body trembling against his. It was a kiss that crossed species and sanity. Jace felt a jolt of energy pass through him, a taste of the power she held back, and for a second, he felt like he was burning up from the inside out. He didn't pull away. He kissed her deeper, his hands sliding up into her thick, braided hair, pulling her down to him. Sarai made a sound low in her throat, a mix of a purr and a growl, and her arms wrapped around him, lifting him off his feet, crushing him against her chest. It was terrifying, and it was perfect. Beep, 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 beep. A screeching alarm shattered the moment. Red strobe lights began to flash in the ceiling. Jace gasped, breaking the kiss. He dropped back to his feet, chest heaving. "What? What is that?" Sarai asked, her eyes wide, lips swollen. The console behind them was smoking. "I think," Jace panted, looking at the melted keyboard, "I think you literally overheated the security system." Sarai looked at the smoking terminal, then at Jace. A smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth. She looked half feral, wild, and incredibly beautiful. "Oops," she said. The door blew open. "Freeze!" a voice shouted. 4 armored council enforcers stood in the doorway, weapons raised. Jace didn't hesitate. "Duck!" he screamed. He pulled the pin on a flashbang grenade and tossed it. Bang! A blinding white light filled the room. The guards screamed. "Move!" Jace yelled, grabbing Sarai's hand. They didn't need to run. Sarai roared, the sound shaking the dust from the ceiling. She opened her mouth and a controlled stream of dragonfire, blue and focused, cut a line across the ceiling, bringing down a heavy ventilation duct between them and the guards. They sprinted through the service exit, Jace leading the way. They burst out into an alleyway, scattering stray cats and droids. "Up!" Jace shouted, pointing to a fire escape. They scrambled up the rusted metal stairs. Below them, they could hear sirens wailing. Repulsor cars with flashing blue lights were swarming the street. They climbed until they hit the rooftops. They ran across the sprawling, interconnected roofs of the Undercity, jumping gaps between buildings. Jace used his grappling line to swing across a wide avenue, Sarai catching him on the other side with effortless strength. They finally stopped on the roof of a tall, abandoned hotel, gasping for breath. The wind whipped at their clothes. Jace collapsed against a parapet, his lungs burning. Sarai stood looking out over the city. Her cloak was torn, revealing the emerald scales beneath. She looked magnificent. "We got it," Jace wheezed, patting the data drive in his pocket. "We got the truth." Sarai turned to him. The rage was gone, replaced by a solemn quiet. "You burned your hands," she said, looking at his palms. "When you touched me, it will heal," Jace said, waving it off. "Worth it." Sarai knelt down so she was eye level with him. "I trust you. Jace Varro," she said. Jace blinked. "That is good. Because I think every cop in the city is looking for us." "No," she said, her intensity silencing him. "I mean, I trust you, more than I have ever trusted anyone, and that terrifies me more than the fleet." "Why?" Jace asked. "Because," she whispered, If I lose you now, I think I really will burn the world down. Jace swallowed hard. No pressure then. Suddenly, the sky above them changed. The stars disappeared. A massive, shimmering grid of orange energy materialized over the city, stretching from horizon to horizon. It was a planetary containment shield. Ships stopped moving. The hum of the city changed as the shield locked into place. Jace looked up. "What is that?" Sarai asked. Jace's face went pale. "That is a Class 1 planetary lockdown," he said. "Nothing goes in. Nothing comes out." He looked at Sarai. "They know we have the data. They just trapped us in a cage with 1,000,000 bounty hunters." Sarai stood up, looking at the shield, then back at Jace. Her eyes glowed. "Then let them come," she said. Jace checked his blaster. He checked the charge. It was half empty. "This is going to be a long night," he said. The containment shield above Namara turned the sky into a ceiling of buzzing orange static. It trapped the heat of the desert and the exhaust of 1,000,000 hovercars inside the city, turning the metropolis into a pressure cooker. The air tasted of ozone and desperate sweat. Jason Sarai had been holed up for 3 days in a crumbling tenement building overlooking the rusty sprawl of the old starport. The apartment was a single room with peeling wallpaper that smelled of mildew and fried garlic. It had one window, one functional light bulb, and a bed that was barely wide enough for a single human, let alone a human and a 7-foot-tall draconian hybrid. The forced proximity was maddening. "It is 90 degrees in here." Jace groaned, sprawling on his back on the thin mattress. He was wearing only his undershirt and boxers, staring at the ceiling fan which was spinning lazily, moving absolutely no air. "And you are essentially a biological space heater." Sarai was sitting on the floor, her back against the wall, sharpening her claws with a piece of stolen plasteel. She had shed the heavy cloak, wearing only the loose desert wraps they had bought. Her gray skin glistened with a faint sheen of perspiration, and the emerald scales along her shoulders pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. "My metabolism runs hot," she said, not looking up. "It is required to generate the thermal output for the breath weapon you find so convenient. You should be grateful. If the heating unit fails, you will not freeze. If the heating unit fails, I will just cuddle up to your left shin and probably sustain 3rd-degree burns," Jace muttered. Sarai paused. She looked at him, her golden eyes unreadable in the dim light. "You talk about touching me often," she noted. "Yet when I move close, your heart rate spikes to 120 beats per minute." Jace rolled onto his side, propping his head on his hand. "It is a survival instinct. Sarai, you are an apex predator. My brain stem thinks you are going to eat me." "And the rest of your brain?" Sarai asked. "The part that is not a terrified monkey?" Jace looked at her. The air in the room seemed to get heavier, charged with the same static that hummed against the shield grid outside. The attraction between them had been a low-level hum since the desert, but in the claustrophobia of the safe house, it was becoming a roar. He watched the way the light caught the ridge of scales along her collarbone. He watched the way her muscles moved under her skin, powerful and fluid. "The rest of my brain is confused," Jace admitted softly. Sarai set down the plasteel. She stood up and moved to the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under her weight. She leaned over him, bracing her hands on either side of his shoulders. Her face was inches from his. He could feel the heat radiating off her, a dry, intense warmth that smelled of smoke and ancient dust. "I do not understand your human rituals," she said, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. "In the archives, I read about courtship. It seems inefficient. You want me. I want you. We are trapped in a box and might die tomorrow. Why are we talking about the temperature? Jace swallowed hard. Her gaze was intense, predatory, and totally lacking in the subtle social cues he was used to. Because, Jace said, his voice straining to stay steady, it is not just about efficiency. Sarai frowned, tilting her head. Is it the scales? She asked. Is it the claws? No, Jace said quickly. God, no. You are incredible. Then what? Jace reached up, his hand hovering near her cheek before he gently rested his palm against her jaw. She leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering shut for a second. Sarai, for 30 years. You had no choices, Jace said softly. You were told where to stand, when to sleep, and who to kill. Your body belonged to the council. It belonged to the war. He ran his thumb over the rough edge of a scale near her ear. I am not going to be another thing that happens to you, Jace said. Freedom is not just about breaking the chains, it is about choosing who gets to touch you. It is about saying yes because you want to, not because it is the logical next step or because you are grateful I pulled a lever. Sarai opened her eyes. The gold irises were wide, swirling with a mix of confusion and a dawning, fragile understanding. You want me to choose, she whispered. I want you to have the power, Jace said. All of it. Sarai stared at him for a long time, then slowly. She pulled back and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at her hands, flexing the deadly claws. No one has ever given me something without asking for a transaction, she said quietly. Well, Jace sat up, wrapping his arms around his knees. I am not no one. I am Jace, and I am dangerously bad at transactions. Ask my loan shark. A ghost of a smile touched Sarai's lips. She looked at him, and the heat in her gaze shifted from a predatory burn to something warmer, something deeper. I am learning, she said. Teach me, Jace Varro. Teach me how to be slow. Before Jace could answer, his wrist comp buzzed against the bed frame. The moment shattered. Jace groaned, checking the display. It is the contact, he said, his voice flat. The rebels. They are ready to meet. The meeting place was a back room of a hydroponics bar in the lowest level of the district, where the air scrubbers barely worked and the clientele looked like they would stab you for a ration bar. 3 people sat around a scarred metal table. The leader, a scarred Twi'lek woman named Kara, looked at Sarai with a mix of awe and hunger. We saw the broadcast, Kara said, leaning forward. The data you pulled from the vault, it is good. But it is not enough to break the council's grip. It proves they lied, Jace argued. It proves they orchestrated the war. People are used to lies, Kara said dismissively. They need a symbol. They need fire. She turned to Sarai. We have cells in 5 systems waiting for a signal, Kara said. If the Dragon of Orizon rises again, this time against the council, the entire sector will revolt. We want you to strike the governor's palace at dawn. Burn the symbol of their power. Show them that the weapon has turned in their hand. Sarai sat silently, her cloak pulled tight. I am done burning cities, she said coldly. Not a city, Kara pressed. A military target. Justice. She tapped a console on the table. A hologram flickered to life. It was archival footage, grainy and shaky, taken from the ground during the destruction of Orizon. We found this in the files you stole, Kara said. We thought you should see it, to fuel your fire. The footage showed a city skyline. It was beautiful. White spires, green parks. Then, the sky turned black. A shadow descended. Fire, green and terrible, rained down. Sarai watched, her face impassive, but her hands gripping the edge of the table hard enough to dent the metal. That was the Dominion Command Center. Kara narrated. You wiped out their central processing. It ended the war. Sarai narrowed her eyes. She leaned closer to the hologram. Freeze that, Sarai commanded. Kara paused the image. Sarai pointed a trembling finger at a banner hanging from a burning building in the background. It was blue and silver. That is not a Dominion flag, Sarai whispered. Jace squinted at the image. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. That is the crest of the Alorian Coalition, Jace said. They were neutrals. They were a medical relief organization. Sarai stood up. The chair crashed backward, clattering against the floor. Orizon was not a command center, she said, her voice rising, vibrating with a growing horror. It was a refugee sanctuary. The Dominion fleet was not retreating from a fight. They were evacuating civilians. Kara looked uncomfortable. She shut off the hologram. Does it matter? Kara asked hard. The council used you to hit a target, neutral or not. The impact was the same. The council is the villain here. I killed them, Sarai whispered. She looked at her hands, staring at them as if they were covered in fresh blood. Millions of them. Refugees. Sick people. I burned them alive. You were a tool, Kara said. A weapon. You cannot blame the sword for the cut. I am not a sword, Sarai roared. The air in the room instantly grew hot. Kara's guards reached for their blasters. Sarai, Jace said, jumping up and grabbing her arm. We have to go. She spun on him, her eyes blazing with a terrifying light. You knew, she accused, though it was irrational. You knew what I was. I didn't know it was a sanctuary, Jace shouted. Nobody knew. That is why we stole the data. It does not change what I did, she screamed. Jace tried to hold her, to ground her. Sarai, listen to me. You were manipulated. You were mind-wiped and triggered. You are a victim in this too. Do not call me a victim, she snarled, shoving him back. He stumbled, hitting the wall hard. She loomed over him, scales flaring bright emerald. A victim is helpless, she hissed. I am not helpless. I am a catastrophe. You want to save me because it makes you feel like a hero. It makes you feel big. But you cannot save a massacre, Jace. You can only run from it. That is not fair, Jace said, breathless, pain radiating from his back. I am here. I am standing right here. Then you are a fool, she spat. She turned and stormed out of the room. The metal door frame warped and glowed orange with heat as she brushed past it. Sarai, Jace yelled, scrambling to follow, but she was gone, disappearing into the crowded, steam-filled alleyways of the Undercity. Jace stood alone in the alley, the heat of her exit still lingering in the air. He felt hollowed out. He had tried. He had really tried, and it had blown up in his face. You can't fix her, kid. Jace turned. A man was standing in the shadows of a recessed doorway. He was wearing a nondescript gray suit, but his posture was military-grade perfect. Who are you? Jace asked, his hand drifting to his blaster. Agent Vane, Imperial Intelligence, the man said smoothly. He didn't draw a weapon. He just held up his hands. I am not here to fight, Vane said. I am here to make an offer. I do not make deals with the council. Jace spat, turning to walk away. Not even for your life? Vane asked. And hers? Jace stopped. Vane stepped out of the shadows. We know she is here, Vane said. The shield grid has narrowed her signature to this district. It is only a matter of time before the hunter-killers arrive, and they are not programmed for capture. What do you want? Jace asked. We want the rebels, Vane said. Lead us to their cell. Give us the coordinates. In exchange, we wipe your debt. We give you a new identity on a core world. And we take Sarai back into custody. Alive. Alive? Jace scoffed. In chains. Alive is better than dead, Vane said reasonably. She is unstable. Jace, you saw it. She just nearly took your head off. She killed millions once. She will do it again. She is a nuke with a heartbeat. Do you really want that on your conscience? Jace stared at the damp pavement. He was so tired. He was tired of running, tired of being broke, tired of being scared. If I give you the rebels, Jace whispered. You do not kill her? We rebind her, Vane said. We put her back to sleep. No pain. Just off. And you walk away. You get to be free. Jace closed his eyes. He imagined it. A clean apartment. A bank account with actual money in it. No dragons. No guilt. He could just walk away. It was the smart play. It was the survival play. Here is the frequency, Vane said, holding out a small transponder. Ping us when you have the location. You have 1 hour. Jace took the transponder. It was cold and heavy in his hand. 1 hour, Jace repeated. Vane nodded and vanished back into the crowd, leaving Jace standing alone with the price of betrayal in his palm. Sarai walked. She did not know where she was going. She just needed to move, to burn off the energy that was threatening to turn her skin into magma. She kept her hood low, navigating the labyrinth of the vertical markets. The city was a hive of life. She passed food stalls smelling of roasted tubers and spice. She passed open windows where families were arguing over dinner. She saw a group of children playing in the runoff from a broken water pipe. They were splashing each other, shrieking with laughter, totally oblivious to the orbital blockade or the ancient weapon walking 10 feet away from them. I killed children like that, she thought. The realization was a physical weight, pressing down on her chest. She stopped by a fruit vendor's stall. The vendor, an old woman with 4 eyes, was being hassled by 3 thugs wearing gang colors. One of the thugs knocked over a basket of star melons. Pay the protection fee, Grandma, the thug sneered, or we torch the stand. Sarai watched. Her instinct, the dragon instinct, roared in her mind. Burn them. Incinerate the threat. Ashes silent. She took a step forward. Her hand glowed under her cloak. It would be so easy. A snap of her fingers, and they would be dust. But then she remembered Jace's voice. You are holding the gun now. She looked at the old woman who was trembling. If Sarai fired, the woman would be caught in the blast. The stall would burn. The building might catch fire. Sarai exhaled slowly, forcing the heat back down into her core. She stepped up behind the thug. She didn't use fire. She reached out a clawed hand and tapped him on the shoulder. The thug spun around. What do you want, tall girl? Sarai lowered her hood just enough for him to see her eyes. She let a tiny, controlled fraction of her fear aura leak out, not enough to mind wipe. Just enough to trigger the primal lizard brain terror of a predator in the dark. Pick up the melons, she whispered. The thug went pale, his pupils dilated. He looked at her, then at his friends, who were suddenly backing away, looking terrified for reasons they couldn't explain. Sorry, the thug stammered. He scrambled to his knees, picking up the fruit with shaking hands. He put them back in the basket. We are leaving. The thug squeaked. They ran. They didn't walk. They sprinted away as if the devil himself had whispered in their ears. The old woman stared at Sarai. Sarai prepared for the scream. She prepared to be called a monster, but then a small boy, no older than 5, poked his head out from behind the vendor's skirts. He looked up at Sarai, at the faint, fading glow of emerald scales on her hand. You are shiny, the boy said. Sarai froze. You are a shiny guardian, the boy declared. Sarai felt a crack in the armor around her heart. It wasn't forgiveness. It didn't erase origin. But it was something. She reached into her pocket, found a credit chip Jace had given her, and placed it on the counter. Buy the boy a sweet, Sarai croaked. She turned and walked away before they could see the tears steaming on her hot cheeks. Jace was sitting on the floor of the tenement when the door opened. Sarai walked in. She looked exhausted, her cloak dusty, but the frenetic, explosive rage was gone. She closed the door and leaned against it. You are still here, she said softly. Yeah, Jace said. He was holding the transponder Vane had given him. He was tossing it up and down in his hand. I met a man, Jace said, not looking at her. An agent. He offered me a deal. Sarai went very still. What kind of deal? Immunity. Jace said, money, a new life. All I had to do was give them the rebels and let them take you back to sleep. Sarai did not move. She did not charge. She just watched him. And? She asked. Jace stopped tossing the device and he gripped it tight. It sounded nice. Jace admitted, being safe. I thought about it. I thought about it for a long time. He looked up at her. His eyes were red-rimmed. I almost did it, Sarai. I almost sold you out. Because I am scared. Because I am just a guy who fixes broken junk. And I am terrified of dying for a cause I do not even understand. Sarai looked at the device in his hand. Why didn't you, she asked. Jace stood up. He walked to the window, opened it, and threw the transponder out. He watched it fall into the dark alley below. Because, Jace said, turning back to her, a kid once called me a coward for watching a neighbor get taken. I refuse to be that guy again. And because you trusted me. He looked at her, shaking and ashamed. I am sorry I hesitated, he whispered. Sarai walked across the room. She moved slowly, deliberately, till she stopped in front of him. You are not a coward. Jace, she said. A coward would have taken the deal and left a note. You stayed, and you told me the truth, even the ugly part. She reached out and took his hand. Her claws retracted slightly, her palm hot against his. I almost burned a fruit vendor today, she confessed, because I was angry. We are both terrified of what we are capable of. She stepped closer, closing the gap between them. I do not want to be a monster. Jace, and I do not want to be a weapon. I want to be this. She guided his hand to her waist beneath the cloak. Jace looked at her. The fear was still there, but it was being drowned out by something stronger. Can I? Jace asked, his voice barely audible. Sarai nodded. Yes. He kissed her. This time, there was no frantic desperation, no clashing of teeth. It was slow. It was deliberate. He pulled her closer, his hands moving over the strange, beautiful landscape of her back, the softness of skin, the hardness of scales, the heat that seemed to radiate from her very bones. They moved to the bed. It was cramped and unglamorous, but it didn't matter. Sarai was hesitant, her movements jerky and uncertain. She had never been touched with affection. She didn't know the language of bodies. Jace slowed everything down. He became the teacher he had promised to be. He whispered to her, telling her what he was doing, asking for permission, checking in with every shift of weight. Is this okay? He murmured against her neck. Yes. She breathed, her voice trembling. The heat in the room rose, but it wasn't the destructive fire of the dragon. It was a shared warmth. Jace felt the immense power coiled inside her, muscles that could crush steel, magic that could burn cities, and was awestruck by the gentleness she was using to hold him. She was treating him like he was made of glass, precious and fragile. For Sarai, it was a revelation. To be touched, not to be hurt, not to be bound, but simply to be held. It broke the last of the icy numbness that had held her heart since Orizon. They shed the layers of clothes and armor, skin against scales, soft against hard. The contrast was jarring and electric. In the dark of the tenement room, with the city under siege outside, they found a quiet, desperate kind of peace. It wasn't just about pleasure, it was an anchor, a promise. Jace Varro, Sarai whispered in the dark, her forehead resting against his. You are my choice, and you are mine, Jace replied. They fell asleep tangled together, a knot of limbs and emotions ignoring the world that wanted to tear them apart. Dawn came too early. The light that filtered through the grime of the window was gray and sickly. Jace woke up with a crick in his neck and a dragon woman's arm draped over his chest. For a second, he felt a profound sense of rightness. Then, the holographic news feed on the wall, which Jace had muted but left running, flashed red. Breaking news. The banner scrolled, target located. Jace sat up, his heart hammering. He grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. Imperial intelligence has triangulated the energy signature of the fugitive entity Sarai. The news anchor announced. Vanguard units are currently mobilizing toward the old Starport district. Residents are ordered to evacuate immediately. Sarai sat up beside him, the sheet pooling around her waist. She looked at the screen, her eyes sharpening instantly from sleep to combat readiness. They found us, she said. Jace looked at the window. He could hear the distant thump-thump-thump of heavy troop transports. How? Jace asked. We didn't use any power. Sarai looked at him, then at the bed. She touched her own chest, where her heart beat a slow, powerful rhythm. My signature, she said. It spikes when my emotional state is elevated. She looked at Jace with a grim, apologetic smile. It seems, Jace Varro, that being happy is a beacon. Jace stared at her. You mean we summoned the fleet because we had a good night? It appears so, Sarai said, standing up and reaching for her clothes. Jace let out a hysterical laugh as he grabbed his pants. Well, he said, cocking his blaster. At least it was worth it. Sarai paused, pulling her tunic on. She looked at him, and for a moment, the warrior was gone, replaced by the woman who had found a shiny guardian in herself. Yes, she said softly. It was. A massive explosion shook the building. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Time to go, Jace said. They ran for the door, leaving the empty room behind, stepping out to face the end of the world. The explosions were not coming from the council ships. Jace realized this as he shoved his feet into his boots. The rhythm was wrong. It was ragged, chaotic, the sound of improvised explosives and kinetic slugs, not the synchronized thrum of Imperial plasma batteries. He kicked the door of the safe house open. The hallway was filled with dust. Through the shattered window at the end of the corridor, he could see the starport. Plumes of black smoke were rising from the docking bays. Small, agile skiffs, rebel markings painted on their hulls, were swarming a council frigate that was trying to lift off. They started without us. Jace shouted over the noise. Kara jumped the gun. Sarai stood behind him, fastening the heavy clasp of her cloak. Her face was grim. They are trying to seize the fleet, she said. They want the ships. They do not care about the truth. If they just start a shooting war now. The council wins, Jace said, checking the charge on his blaster. The Empire has more guns. They will just spin this as a terrorist attack led by the Mad Dragon. We need to change the narrative. We cannot run. Jace, Sarai said. Her voice was calm, oddly centered amidst the chaos. If we leave now, the galaxy keeps bleeding. The Council stays in power. The rebels become the new tyrants. And I am just a ghost story used to scare children. So what do we do? Jace asked. We are two people against a planetary blockade. We go to the Spire, Sarai said, pointing to the massive needle-like communications tower that dominated the Namara skyline. It pierced the cloud layer, a glittering lance of glass and steel. That is the primary broadcast nexus, Sarai explained. It is hard-line to the hypercom boys. If we can get inside, we can beam the data directly to every system in the network. No filters, no rebel edits, just the truth. It is also the most heavily guarded building on the planet, Jace pointed out. Sarai looked at him. A small, dangerous smile touched her lips. Good thing you are dating a siege weapon, she said. The infiltration was less Mission Impossible and more Demolition Derby. They hijacked a maintenance drone, a heavy, hovering slab of metal used for window washing, and rode it up the side of the spire. The wind whipped at them, tearing at Jace's clothes. The city below was a map of fire and flashing lights. Above them, the tower's automated defenses engaged. Hard light barriers flickered into existence, blocking the maintenance shafts. "Hold on!" Sarai yelled. She did not fire a blast. She simply reached out with her mind. Jace watched, mesmerized, as the air around her rippled. She grabbed the hard light barrier, which was theoretically intangible energy, and bent it. She treated the force field like a curtain, wrenching it open with a grunt of psychic exertion. Sparks showered down. The drone surged through the gap. Subtle. Jace yelled, "I am a hammer, not a scalpel," Sarai shouted back. They crashed the drone onto a maintenance deck halfway up the spire. They hit the metal grating hard, rolling to a stop. Before they could stand, a squad of security droids rounded the corner. Jace scrambled for cover behind a ventilation unit. He pulled out his data pad, frantically tapping into the local network. "I need 3 seconds," Jace yelled. Sarai stepped in front of him. She extended her hand. A pulse of kinetic force slammed into the droids, knocking them backward like bowling pins. She didn't crush them, she just disabled them, stripping their sensors with a precise EMP burst from her fingertips. "Clear," she called. They ran. They sprinted down sleek white corridors, bypassing checkpoints with a mix of Jace's slicing tools and Sarai's brute force. They reached a service bridge that spanned the hollow core of the tower. It was a sheer drop of 2,000 feet to the reactor level below. The bridge was narrow, made of transparent polymer. As they ran across, a blast from a sniper on the upper gantry shattered the railing next to Jace. He stumbled, his boots slipping on the smooth surface. He flailed, tipping over the edge. Jace! He fell. For a second, there was just gravity and the terrifying rush of wind. Then something slammed into him. He wasn't falling. He was dangling. He looked up. Sarai was kneeling on the edge of the bridge. From her back, a single massive dragon wing had erupted, tearing through her cloak and tunic. The wing was not flesh, but a construct of hard light and bone, glowing with fierce emerald energy. The tip of the wing was wrapped around Jace's waist, holding him suspended over the abyss. She grunted, hauling him up with a heave of her powerful back muscles. She deposited him on the deck. Safe. The wing dissolved into mist, retracting into her spine. "You okay?" she panted, her eyes wide. Jace lay on the floor, staring at her. "You have wings," he wheezed. "I told you that," she said. "Yeah, but seeing it is different," Jace said, scrambling to his feet. "Thanks for the catch. I refuse to lose my favorite fragile mammal now," Sarai said, a tremor in her voice. "Move." They burst into the main broadcast nexus. It was a circular room filled with holographic displays and humming server banks. In the center, a massive crystal pulsated with data streams, the heart of the planetary network. Jace threw his pack onto the main console. He plugged in the data drive. "I am in," Jace shouted, his fingers flying. "Initializing upload. This will take a minute to bypass the encryption." The doors at the far end of the room hissed open. Council Marines poured in. These were not droids. These were elite soldiers in black armor, carrying heavy repeaters. "Contact front," the lead Marine shouted. Sarai moved. She did not turn into a dragon. She did not burn the room. She became a blur of motion. She erected a telekinetic shield in front of Jace, absorbing the first volley of plasma fire. Then she advanced. She moved like water and fire. She dodged shots with impossible speed, closing the distance. She grabbed the barrel of a repeater rifle, heating it instantly until the metal warped and jammed. She swept the legs of a soldier, knocking him down, then spun to deflect a grenade with a backhand slap of force. She was precise. She was careful. Every strike was calculated to disable, not kill. She shattered armor, not bones. She knocked enemies unconscious, not dead. It was harder this way. Jace could see the strain on her face. It took infinitely more control to spare your enemies than to incinerate them. "Jace!" she yelled, gritting her teeth as she held back a wave of suppression fire. "Hurry! I am at 80%, Jace yelled. "They are jamming the signal. I have to route it through the rebel relay." He tapped into the rebel frequency. "Kara!" Jace shouted into his comms. "I am sending the package. Open the relay." There was a pause. Then Kara's voice crackled in his ear. "We are receiving." "Jace, but we are scrubbing the audio." "What?" Jace froze. "We are cutting Sarai's confession," Kara said coldly. "We are only broadcasting the Council's files. We need a hero. Jace, not a war criminal. We will tell the galaxy she was a prisoner, a martyr. We will edit the history." "No!" Jace screamed. "That is a lie. It is the same lie the Council told. It is a necessary lie," Kara argued. "Upload the data, or we cut the link entirely." Jace looked at Sarai. She was holding off 12 Marines, her body surrounded by a halo of defensive energy. She was fighting for a chance to tell the truth, to own her sins. "They want to edit you," Jace called out to her. "The rebels. They want to make you a saint." Sarai deflected a plasma bolt into the ceiling. She looked back at Jace. "No more saints," she snarled. "No more monsters, just me." "Override them," she commanded. "I can't," Jace yelled. "They control the handshake. Then give it to me," Sarai shouted. She disengaged from the fight, leaping backward to land beside Jace. She slammed her hand onto the console, right over the data port. Her eyes went white. She didn't use code. She used raw power. She pushed her consciousness into the machine, her bioelectric energy flooding the system. "Override," she whispered. Sparks flew from the console. The holographic displays turned from blue to gold. The signal punched through the jamming. It punched through the rebel filters, and it hit the hypercom boys and screamed out into the void. Every screen in the room, every screen in the city, every screen in the sector flickered and changed. Sarai's face appeared. She was not hiding. She was not cloaked. She stood tall, sweat streaking her gray skin, the chaos of the battle visible behind her. She looked terrifying. She looked regal. She looked broken. "My name is Sarai." She spoke. Her voice was not the psychic whisper, but her own voice, amplified by the tower to boom across the stars. "I am the one who burned Orizon." The fighting in the room stopped. The Marines lowered their weapons, staring at the screens. "I killed millions." Sarai continued, her voice trembling but clear. "I was a weapon forged by the Council and the Dominion to keep you afraid, to keep you quiet. They made me a monster so they could sell you protection. She looked directly into the camera, but I pulled the trigger. The guilt is mine. Do not make me a hero. Do not make me a symbol for your revolution. I am not your savior. I am just a warning. Tears leaked from her golden eyes. Build a world where you do not need monsters to keep you safe, she pleaded. Build a world where no one has to be a weapon. That is the only freedom that matters. The upload completed. The files, the treaties, the orders, the uncut footage of the war, scrolled rapidly alongside her face. Jace watched her, his heart swelling so much it hurt. She was magnificent. She was stripping herself bare before the entire galaxy, refusing to be anything other than the messy, tragic truth. Then, the alarm screamed. A new sound cut through the room. A high-pitched, rising whine that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Sarai gasped. She grabbed her chest, doubling over. Sarai. Jace caught her before she hit the floor. Her skin was scalding hot, hotter than before. The scales on her arms were glowing with a blinding white intensity. What is happening? Jace yelled. It is the kill switch. Sarai choked out, her voice wet with pain. They triggered it. On the screen, a new message flashed, overriding her face. Asset compromised. Termination sequence initiated. Core overload imminent. The Council had a failsafe. If she ever went rogue, truly rogue, they could detonate her. Run. Sarai gasped, shoving Jace away. Her skin was starting to crack, light leaking from the fissures. I am going to blow. Jace, I will take the tower. I will take the district. No, Jace said, grabbing her shoulders. Run, she screamed. Her voice was distorting, becoming the dragon's roar. Do not die for me. Live. Jace, remember me. Remember I tried. She was convulsing. The energy building inside her was immense. It was a sun trying to be born in a human body. Jace looked at the door. He could run. He could maybe make it to the lift. He could survive. He looked at Sarai. She was terrified. She was dying alone, consumed by the very power she had hated her whole life. Jace refused. He dropped to his knees and pulled her into his arms. No, he said. Jace, please, she sobbed. It burns. Focus on me, Jace shouted over the rising whine of the overload. Look at me. Sarai. He held her tight, ignoring the searing heat that blistered his hands. Remember the campfire? Jace yelled. Remember the spicy meat? Remember the boy? The shiny guardian? Sarai's eyes were rolling back. Pain. Just pain. You are not a bomb, Jace screamed. You are Sarai. You like bad jokes. You steal the covers. You are real. He grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. Stay with me. The light was blinding now. The explosion was seconds away. Jace leaned in, and he kissed her. It was a kiss of absolute desperation. It was a suicide pact. It was an anchor dropped into a hurricane. He poured everything he had into it, his love, his fear, his absolute belief in her right to exist. Sarai felt him. Through the white-hot agony of the overload, she felt his soft, fragile human mouth on hers. She felt his shaking hands holding her together. He was not running. He was burning with her. Something inside her shifted. The energy that was spiraling inward, compressing toward detonation, hit the wall of his presence and bounced. He is here. I am here. I choose. She screamed against his mouth. She didn't try to stop the energy. She redirected it. She pushed, not down, into the core, but out. She shoved the explosion away from her body, away from the city, channeling it into a single, pure frequency. A wave of invisible force exploded from the tower. It was not fire. It was an electromagnetic pulse of godlike proportions. It swept over the city. The lights in the room died. The consoles sparked and went black. The Marines' armor seized up as their servos fried. The drones dropped from the sky. The wave hit the blockade fleet in orbit. Ships went dark, their reactors scramming, drifting dead in the void. The kill switch signal was severed. The network was fried. Silence fell. Absolute, ringing silence. The city of Namara was dark, save for the starlight and the faint red glow of emergency chemical lights cracking to life in the distance. Jace lay on the floor of the Nexus, gasping for air. His ears were ringing. He couldn't feel his fingertips. Sarai lay draped over him. She was heavy. She was not glowing. She was cold. "Sarai?" Jace whispered. His voice was a broken croak. He pushed her up. She was limp. Smoke curled from her hair. Her skin was gray as ash. "Sarai!" Jace yelled, shaking her. Her chest didn't move. "No, no, no," Jace pleaded. "Do not do this. Do not you dare do this." He pressed his ear to her chest. Silence. Then a thump. Slow, weak, but there. Thump. She took a ragged, shuddering breath. Jace collapsed back onto the floor, laughing and crying at the same time. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her smoky hair. "You crazy lizard," he sobbed. "You crazy, beautiful lizard." Above them, through the glass ceiling of the dome, the sky was full of drifting, darkened ships. The stars were shining brighter than Jace had ever seen them. The truth was out. The lights were out, and they were alive. The galaxy did not reboot all at once. It flickered back to life, system by system, node by node, like a string of old lights struggling against a bad circuit. Namara was dark. The electromagnetic pulse Sarai had unleashed had fried the power grid, the traffic control networks, and the maglev trains frozen on their tracks. The silence that hung over the desert metropolis was heavy, broken only by the wail of distant sirens and the crackle of atmospheric static. Jay sat on the floor of a maintenance terrace halfway down the spire, his back resting against a cold generator housing. He held a portable medical scanner, one of the few pieces of tech that had survived the blast because it had been shielded in his pack, and ran it slowly over Sarai's arm. She lay still, her eyes closed. The emerald scales that usually armored her skin were dull, gray and cracked, like stone that had been in a fire too long. Her breathing was shallow but steady. "You are healing," Jace whispered, reading the display. "Slowly, but you are healing." Sarai did not open her eyes, but a faint, dry smile touched her lips. "I told you," she murmured, her voice rasping like sandpaper. "It takes more than a planetary reboot to kill me." "You tried your best," Jace said, though there was no heat in his voice, only relief. He looked out over the city. Below them, in the streets that were usually rivers of neon light, thousands of small chemical fires burned, torches, campfires, emergency flares. The people of Namara were waking up to a world without a ceiling. The containment shield was gone. The council blockade was drifting in orbit, dark and silent. Jace adjusted the bandage on his own hand, which was blistered from the heat of holding her. He reached over and turned the dial on a battery-operated receiver he had scavenged from a survival kit. The audio was grainy, filled with hiss and pop, bouncing off the few atmospheric relays that were coming back online. Reports of riots in the core systems. The voice of a news anchor cut in and out. Council High Command has issued a state of emergency, demanding the immediate surrender of the entity Sarai. Jace turned the dial. "She is a savior," a different voice shouted, this one from a pirate frequency. "She broke the chains." The dragon spoke the truth. "Down with the lies." He turned it again. "A monster who admitted to genocide." A third voice, calm and patrician, argued, "Do we simply forgive the burning of Orizon because she gave a sad speech? Justice demands her execution. She is a weapon that has gone off once. She will go off again." Jace clicked the radio off. "They are already arguing about who owns the narrative," Jace said bitterly. "Half the galaxy wants to build you a statue. The other half wants to mount your head on a wall." Sarai opened her eyes. The golden light in them was dim, like a dying ember, but it was clear. The madness, the frantic rage that had driven her for days, was gone. "Let them argue," she said softly. "At least they are arguing about the truth, not a fairy tale." She shifted, wincing as her stiff muscles protested. She pushed herself up to a sitting position, leaning against Jace's shoulder. He instinctively adjusted his stance to support her weight. "What happens now?" Jace asked, looking at the stars that were no longer obscured by the shield grid. "They will come," Sarai said. "The Council, the rebels. They will not leave a loose end like me dangling in the wind." As if summoned by her words, a low hum vibrated through the terrace floor. Jace looked up. A shuttle was descending from the upper atmosphere. It was not an attack craft. It was sleek, white, and bore no weapons. On its hull, painted in broad strokes, was the symbol of the Council intertwined with the crest of the Rebel Alliance. A visual impossibility that made Jace blink. "They are coming together?" Jace asked, frowning. "Fear makes strange bedfellows," Sarai said, watching the ship land on the upper platform. The ramp descended. 3 figures walked out. One was Agent Vane, the intelligence officer who had offered Jace the deal in the alley. He looked tired, his pristine suit rumpled, his cybernetic eye twitching. The second was Kara, the rebel leader. She had a bandage wrapped around her head and looked furious, but she was walking in step with Vane. The third was a tall, severe woman in the robes of a high minister. Jace stood up, helping Sarai to her feet. He kept his hand near his holster, though he knew his blaster was fried. "Negotiators," Sarai whispered. Vane stepped forward, his hands open to show he was unarmed. "Jace Varro," Vane said, his voice amplified by a collar mic. "And the Lady Sarai, we are not here to fight." "That is a nice change of pace," Jace shouted back. "Usually you lead with plasma torpedoes. The situation has changed," the High Minister said, stepping forward. Her voice was ice and steel. The broadcast went out. "Mr. Varro, the entire galaxy saw the files. The truth about Orizon, the truth about the Dominion Treaty. The Council's credibility is fractured, shattered," Kara corrected sharply. "Fractured," the minister insisted. "There are riots on 12 worlds. The blockade fleet has mutinied. The galaxy is on the brink of civil war." "So you are here to surrender?" Jace asked hopefully. "No," Vane said. "We are here to offer a solution, a compromise." Sarai took a step forward. She towered over them, even in her weakened state. Her tattered cloak blew in the wind. "Speak," she commanded. The minister looked up at the dragon woman, fear clearly visible in her eyes. But she held her ground. "We cannot undo the past," the minister said, "but we can secure the future. The galaxy is terrified. Sarai, they know what you are. They know you can burn cities. They know you can fry planetary networks. If you remain free, unchecked, there will be panic. Systems will arm themselves. War is inevitable." "We propose the Obsidian Accords," Vane said, pulling a datapad from his jacket. He slid it across the terrace floor. Jace picked it up. "Amnesty," Vane explained. "Full pardon for you, Sarai, and for you, Jace. No execution, no prisons in exchange. Sarai voluntarily submits to a new binding." Jace felt his blood turn cold. "You want to chain her again?" Jace demanded. "Not like before." Kara jumped in, her voice urgent. Listen, Jace, this isn't torture. It is regulation. She would be housed in a facility on a neutral world, under international oversight. Rebel doctors, council scientists, neutral observers. She would be a deterrent, yes, but a passive one. A guarantee that no side can attack the other without risking her release. She becomes the nuclear option that keeps the peace, Vane added. Jace looked at the datapad. It was full of legal terms, biometric dampeners, geofencing, approved travel zones. It is a cage, Jace said, throwing the pad back at Vane's feet. It is a polite, well-decorated cage with a committee holding the key. It is stability, the minister shouted. Without her containment, the fear will tear us apart. Sarai looked at the pad lying on the concrete. She looked at Kara, who was looking back with pleading eyes. If I agree, Sarai asked slowly, her voice deep and resonant. The war stops? Yes, Kara said. The council agrees to step down from emergency powers. We form a coalition government. The fighting ends today. And if I refuse, then we have to hunt you, Vane said simply. Not because we want to, but because we cannot let a god walk among mortals without a leash. The entire fleet will come, and this time, we won't try to take you alive. Sarai looked out at the city. She saw the fires. She saw the chaos. She felt the weight of the millions of lives she had already extinguished. One signature, she thought. And I can save them all. I can stop the bleeding. I just have to give up the sky. She looked at Jace. He was looking at her, his face pale, his fists clenched. He was shaking his head slightly. Sarai, Jace whispered. Don't. It would save lives. Jace, she said softly. It is a lie, Jace said, loud enough for the delegation to hear. He stepped between her and the negotiators. You are offering her a prettier version of the same hell, Jace spat at Vane. You talk about stability? You talk about peace? A peace built on a monster in a box is not peace. It is a hostage situation. He turned to Sarai, grabbing her shoulders. If you sign that, Jace said fiercely, you are telling them that they are right. You are telling them that power cannot exist without chains. You are telling them that they don't have to build a just society. They just need a bigger gun to point at each other. It is better than war, Sarai said, testing him. Is it? Jace asked. Or is it just easier? He looked into her eyes. Regulated monsters are still an excuse, Sarai. They are an excuse for them not to grow up. Sarai stared at him. She saw the fierce, stubborn light in his eyes, the salvage rat who had refused to run, the man who had kissed her while she burned. She smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful smile. You are right, she said. She turned back to the delegation. I refuse, Sarai said. Vane sighed, reaching for his comms unit. Then you leave us no choice. Wait, Sarai said. I refuse your cage, but I also refuse your war. She stepped to the edge of the terrace. She looked up at the sky, at the black void between the stars. You are afraid of me because I am here, she said. You are afraid that I will pick a side. You are afraid of the power I hold. She turned back to them. So I am removing the power from the board. What do you mean? The minister asked. I am leaving, Sarai said. Not just this planet. I am leaving Imperial space. I am going beyond the outer rim, into the dark, where you cannot follow, and where you cannot call me back. Silence descended on the terrace. If you leave, Kara said, her voice trembling, there is no deterrent. The factions, they might attack each other. Then you will have to learn to talk to each other, Sarai said coldly. You will have to build a peace that does not rely on the threat of my fire. You will have to be adults. That is, that is impossible, the minister stammered. The panic. The panic is your problem, Sarai said. I am done being your solution. She looked at Vane. You have 1 hour to clear the airspace, she said, or I will fly through your ships, and I am currently very full of energy. Vane looked at her. He looked at the determination in her stance. He realized, with the sinking feeling of a chess player who has lost his queen, that she was not bluffing. 1 hour, Vane said stiffly. The delegation turned and walked back to the shuttle. The ramp closed. The ship lifted off, disappearing into the smog-choked sky. Jace and Sarai were alone again. That was bold. Jace exhaled, sliding down the wall to sit on the floor. It was necessary, Sarai said. She sat down beside him, her long legs stretching out. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the suns begin to rise in the east. The light turned the desert sand to gold, washing out the fires of the city. So, Jace said, picking at a loose thread on his trousers. The outer rim, that is, far, it is unmapped, Sarai agreed. There are no star charts, no jump gates, no council. Sounds quiet, Jace said. Sarai turned to look at him. The morning light caught the gold in her eyes. What do you want, Jace? She asked. Jace blinked. What do you mean? I want, world peace, justice, the usual. No, Sarai said gently. She reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool now, the fire banked deep inside. Stop being a hero for a second. Stop being the man who saved the dragon. What do you, Jace Varro, actually want? Jace looked at her. He opened his mouth to make a joke about credits or a faster ship, but the words died in his throat. He looked at the woman who had burned a city and saved a planet. He looked at the scars on her arms and the hope in her eyes. I want, Jace started, his voice cracking. He took a breath. I want a kitchen, he said. Sarai tilted her head. A kitchen? Yeah, Jace said, looking at his boots. I want a small house, somewhere with breathable air, maybe some grass. I want to wake up in the morning and argue about whose turn it is to make coffee. I want to fix a generator that is just broken, not rigged to explode. He laughed, a self-deprecating sound. I want to sit on a porch and watch you coil up in the sun like a giant cat. I want a life that is small and boring and ours. He looked up at her, expecting her to laugh, expecting the ancient warrior to mock his domestic fantasy. I know, Jace whispered. It is selfish. The galaxy is burning and I want toast. Sarai did not laugh. She squeezed his hand so hard his knuckles popped. It is not selfish, she said fiercely. She leaned in, pressing her forehead against his temple. Jace, if we cannot fight for mornings like that, what is the revolution for? She pulled back to look at him. I have spent 300 years being a symbol, she said. I have been a weapon, a monster, a prisoner, and a god. I am tired of being big. Jace, I want to be small. I want the toast. Jace smiled, his eyes stinging. We are going to be terrible at being normal, he warned. We will learn, Sarai said. She stood up, pulling him with her. Come with me, she said, beyond the rim. There are worlds out there that have never heard of the Council. Worlds where the stars have different names. We can build something there. Jace looked at the city below. He thought about the rebels. He thought about the chaos that was coming. If I go, Jace said, hesitation creeping into his voice. I am abandoning the fight. I sparked this fire. Sarai, if I leave, who helps them build the new world? Sarai laughed, a soft, rumbling sound. Jace, look at you, she teased. You are a salvager who hates paperwork. You are allergic to committees. Do you really think you belong in a Senate hearing? Jace grimaced. God, no. I would shoot someone within a week. Exactly, Sarai said. You are the spark. Jace, you are not the engine. The galaxy has plenty of politicians. It has plenty of soldiers. It has very few people who know how to love a monster without flinching. She touched his cheek. Your work here is done. Tissue paper. Let them build their own piece. You have a generator to fix. Jace took a deep breath. He looked at the horizon, then at her. Okay, he said. Okay? Okay, Jace repeated, a grin spreading across his face. Let's get out of here. Getting off-world was easier than expected. The chaos in the starport meant that no one was checking ID codes, and the fact that half the council fleet was offline meant the blockade was porous. They found an independent freighter captain, a Duros with a scarred face who didn't ask questions when Jace handed him a bag of rare, pre-war circuit boards he had scavenged from the tower. You want to go to the Deep Black? The captain asked, eyeing Sarai, who was hooded and standing in the shadows of the cargo bay. No charts out there, no fuel stations. We like the privacy, Jace said. The captain shrugged. Your funeral. We lift in 10. There were no grand speeches, no parades. Jace sent a single encrypted message to Kara. Good luck. Don't screw it up. As the freighter lifted off, the repulsor engines humming a vibrating lullaby. Jace stood at the viewport in the cargo hold. He watched the desert recede. He saw the scars of the pylon site, a tiny black dot in the red sands. He saw the spire still smoking. He remembered the moment he had crested that dune, looking for salvage, and found a nightmare in chains. He had thought, in that moment, that freeing her was a simple act, a binary choice, good or bad, open the box or leave it closed. He realized now how wrong he was. Freeing her had not fixed the galaxy. It had broken it. It had shattered the comfortable lies that held the Empire together. It had unleashed chaos, fear, and uncertainty. But it had also unleashed truth. Freedom wasn't a fix, it was a mess. It was the terrifying, complicated work of waking up every day and choosing who you wanted to be, without a script, without a master, and it was worth it. Jace felt a presence beside him. Sarai had dropped her hood. She was wearing a simple mechanic's jumpsuit she had found in a locker, the sleeves rolled up to accommodate her scaled forearms. She looked less like a goddess of destruction and more like just Sarai. Scared? Jace asked, not looking away from the shrinking planet. Terrified, Sarai admitted. She leaned against the bulkhead, her shoulder brushing his. I do not know how to be free. Jace, she whispered. I do not know who I am when I am not fighting. Jace reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. We will figure it out, he said. We have time. Sarai looked at him. She looked at the reflection of the stars in the viewport. She shifted slightly. From her back, a small, partial manifestation of her dragon wing unfurled. It wasn't the armored shield of the battle. It was soft, translucent, glowing with a gentle, warm light. She curled the wing around Jace, wrapping him in a protective, luminous cloak. It was a gesture of possession, of protection, and of profound tenderness. Jace leaned his head against her shoulder, feeling the heat of her skin and the hum of the wing around him. You know, Jace mumbled, closing his eyes. Being cuddled by a dragon is weird. Is it? Sarai asked, resting her chin on the top of his head. Yeah, Jace said. It is the weirdest, best mistake I have ever made. The ship shuddered as the hyperdrive engaged. The stars outside the viewport stretched into lines of infinite light. The desert planet vanished. The council, the rebels, the debts, and the ghosts of the old war were left behind. Ahead of them lay the void. Unknown, dangerous, empty. Jace smiled. It looked like a good place for a kitchen. The ship slipped into the aperture of hyperspace, disappearing in a flash of white, leaving the galaxy to heal itself, one messy, beautiful day at a time.